All right, so let's go through and make a final push here to the tail end of class. And so what I'd like to do is quickly go through some of the components that I know you will absolutely see on the exam, and then if time permits, go through and take a look at some of the other things that you submitted. Just a reminder that next Friday, we're going to be doing a comprehensive review on CISSP at, like I said, 1 o'clock. Is that right? 1 o'clock. 1 to 3 on the 18th, and 1 to 3 on the 25th. So, we can. It'll be using the same. That's right. So it'll be 10:18. I'll just put it into the chat here, and I'll also send out some meeting requests. So again, that's free of charge. We're gonna throw that in just to make sure everybody feels confident. And again, the following week, we're gonna do it again. So I think that is what's important. Any type of review is to try to attend that, please. And if you can, then that would be great. Otherwise, it doesn't mean that you're gonna not pass this thing. It's just, just an extra, 4 hours of time that we can spend making sure that you guys completely understand everything that's going to be on the exam and put you in the best possible position to be successful here. So I do that to really, help you, but also, help us as well, and with our making sure that we do our due diligence. So next Friday, 1 to 3 Central Time, will an email be sent out, or we must seek it? Yeah, I'll send out an email here after the class today to make sure that are available, you can attend them. Okay, so let's keep on going here, because there's a lot of things that I want to cover, and you've been watching throughout the week a lot of the different components that I call the golden rules have come into play here. Again, let's just look at them one more time. People safety first. Management's buy-in is critical. Everybody in the organization is responsible for security. Training is necessary. And then policy. So at a super high level, know these at a super high level. In addition to that, the crypto bucket. Remember, many of the components that we've been talking about throughout the week have come into life with the crypto bucket. I would definitely know that at a high level as well. And we talked about this other component, the defense in depth approach, if you recall that. So that's something else that I definitely would recommend. In addition to that, one of the things that you definitely want to pay attention to are the different types of firewalls. And so we spent a amount of time on the firewalls throughout the week. If you recall, the static packet filtering or stateless, stateful as well, DPI, next generation, multi-homed. We went through and I showed you examples of rules on the stateless and what was the difference between that and the stateful packet inspection. It has a state table, so it's able to keep the status of each packet as it comes through. And so, that is something that you should definitely, take a look-see at. Over the course of the next week, I definitely would take a look at some of the different types of wireless encryption as well. Usually there is a question in or around the different types of wireless encryption. We didn't really spend that much time at all throughout the week. I mentioned, I think, the initialization vector and, how WEP works, but, understanding how the extensible authentication protocol, as well as the lightweight extensible authentication protocol and the protected extensible authentication protocol, those may come in handy because it's likely that you're going to see one question on the exam. In addition to that, and I have some videos that I usually that are already posted on YouTube that I usually will provide people that for things like the LEAP, the EAP, and the PEEP. We already have something that's out there that's pretty cool that I think that you should take a look at. In addition to that, usually we didn't talk at all about Bluetooth. These are pretty straightforward. The difference between Bluetooth jacking and Bluetooth snarking. Bluejacking is unsolicited SMS over Bluetooth. And then unauthorized Bluetooth connections are called blue snarfing. Usually they like one or the other of these. If you get any on Bluetooth, war driving is something that you may have seen before, and if not, then that's fine. There's a pretty cool website out there that I want to show you real quick about war driving, and it's called wiggle.net. Wiggle.net. If you've not seen this before, it's pretty cool. So it'll show my location here, and then all of these dots that you see are things that have been war driven in or around me right here, and it's still drawing a little bit. It's got tons and tons of wireless networks been popped up here. So has Bluetooth devices and cell towers that are on here as well. So you can go out and check out this wiggle.net, and if you're interested, you could even put in your location here and see if somebody has war driven your area. If you're like me and you kind of just zoom out here, you can see I'm in Huntsville. If I was to go over, and as I kind of just zoom out, you can see that it immediately will start to redraw. And so if I look at Atlanta, for instance, it's been mapped out hella. If I zoom out even further, let's see if we can get it to redraw. You can see that all the places that you would think have been war driven are most of the populated places here in the United States. And then in addition, keep zooming out, all over the world. All right? Look at that. And so, yes, they do. I think they got a class action lawsuit as well, because they were doing that whenever they were driving around with the Street View as well. But Wiggle has been around for a while, so you can check that out. But specifically for, war driving, because you may see a question on your exam about war driving. Again, we talked about DMZs. DMZs are definitely going to be on your exam. So I would definitely spend some time, if you don't already know what DMZ is, going in and understanding what a DMZ is. That's definitely something of that you need to know. In addition to that, in addition to a DMZ, understanding what this is right here. Network address translation, NAT, and how that works is very important. We went through high level. I talked about from the networking perspective, you definitely should read up on these 3 protocols. If there's something that they love to ask, it's on these 3 protocols. So if you were like, yo, Ben, give me the straight dope, there's going to be at least one question on one of these. Hopefully it's open shortest path first, because that's the one that everybody knows without even studying. But this slide right here, there's probably going to be one question on those 3, one question on SNMP. So I would definitely know what SNMP is. And then one question on dynamic and static routing, which these aren't rocket science, right? These, as soon as you go in and kind of lift up the hood on all 3 of these, you're going to be like, yeah, okay, no problem. In addition to that, just kind of going through and taking a look. If you don't already know what this is, definitely there's going to be one question on this DNS. It might give you a context clue of FQDN, fully qualified domain name. It might give you, the idea of resolving IP to a fully qualified domain name, something that's human readable. If you recall, when I mentioned DNS, I said that it's likely that there may be something that comes up on an alias record or on an MX record. Context clue would be the port here, port 53 would be a context clue that would lead you to the right answer. There is a slide here where I do give you, a lot of the ports that we feel are going to be on the exam. So you can go back and look at your slides, and this is in the communications and network security domain that you can go and take a look at that. At a high level, again, in that same domain, I know that a lot of you said that this is the weak one for you. If you're looking to know something like the back of your hand, I would take this one, because you're definitely going to have at least one question on one of these on here. Probably not going to be this one. It'll probably be either HTTP or SSL or TLS. And so I would know, HTTPS, know that SSL transitioned over to TLS. And again, I'm recording right now, so you can go back and take a look at this. And I'll pop these up. I'll try to get all these videos up here for you tonight. In addition to that, just in the networking domain, since so many of you have said that you sucked at that domain, the DHCP, this is something that, from a networking perspective, fair game. I'd be surprised if they didn't say something about DHCP and just expect you to know it. we kind of mentioned how this works, and went through that with pretty good detail, I think, on how all of DHCP works within a network. So at a high level, I would say, that's what I would definitely review. Obviously, you should know the CIA triad. I mean, by now, I've kind of beat that into submission throughout the week. I mentioned the IAAA at least a dozen times, if not more, right? So definitely expect at least one question on the IAAA. In addition to that, I would think that you're either going to see due care or due diligence. One question on that. They love the layered approach, the defense in depth approach. They love that. So, I would expect at least one question on the defense in depth approach. Again, at a super high level. I talked about the data owner and the data custodian throughout the week. You're going to see one or the other on those. One or the other on those. I went through and talked about, what the data owners do. They create these things called views. Remember us talking about this? And so those database views that I went through today and showed you how to use database management system. I would say that there's going to be at least a question on views, database views. They want you to know what that means, at a high level. So keep that in mind. All of these different standards here, there's only going to be one question in it. I don't know which one it's going to be on, but it could be, any of those NIST ones that we see. Could be the PCI DSS. It could be, OWASP. But, just at a super high level, try to see if you can remember those, and maybe make a note card for them. Obviously, COBIT. I've mentioned that a hella bunch this week. Know that the procedures, knowing what procedures are, is super important as well. Baseline and policies, as you would expect, those would be something of importance as well. We talked about the threat modeling, and I went through Stride, Pasta, and Dread. Usually one of those three is on there, and I'm guessing it's probably going to be Stride. But, I'm just telling you what, if I would, this is what I know would be 100%. Everything that I'm telling you, we have seen on the exams before. As I'm continuing to do what I'm doing here, in the governance components, understanding, what governance means, the idea of an authority to operate or an authorization to operate. In addition to that, separation of duties, understanding what job rotation is, separation of duties. Definitely going to get one question on that. In addition to that, I talked about this the other day, the service level agreement. Good chance that they want you to know what that is. For risk, even though the guy that just took it a couple weeks ago came out and said that he didn't see any SLEs or AL calculations on there, I would remember what residual risk means, because this other stuff you kind of already know. Definitely, you will see at least one question on the difference between quantitative risk assessments and qualitative risk assessments. I would definitely know those. And even though he said that there wasn't any calculations on here, I wouldn't spend much time on this, but just at a high level understanding that the different calculations would be beneficial to you. In practice, I use this all the time, this risk matrix. So I would encourage you to, in your practice, to start using it if you don't already. The different types of controls, we talked about these. And we did have some good debates on some of these, but understanding the differences between deterrence, preventative, detective, compensating, corrective, recovery, and directive. You're going to have one question on that, and they're not going to be easy, right? They're not going to be easy questions. You're going to be like, well, it could be this, but it could be that, and that's where the context clues come into play and get you down to a 50-50. Here, the risk frameworks, they're expecting you to know RMF, I think. So they probably won't ask you about RMF. I would think that they're going to ask you about the Octave framework instead. Very similar to RMF, but just, make a note card with Octave on the front. The Delphi technique. Don't sweat the technique. The Delphi technique. That reminds me of a song. Keep on going here, guys. In the third chapter, you saw this twice. You saw me give these twice throughout the week, and anytime I do that, usually that means that one of these three. Sorry, let me go back. One of these three is going to be on the exam. You're going to have one question on one of these three, and again, that's why I keep saying, like, the pockets of information. You just got to know a little bit about a lot. So it's 10 miles wide and an inch deep. These three all are very important, but you just got to be able to differentiate between the three because you're going to have one question on. In addition to that, definitely, if you spend some time on business impact analysis or business impact assessments, I would say great chance you're going to have at least one question like that. And typically it's the order. We saw a question from ISC Squared earlier on the week, like which comes first, and that's business impact assessment. Know the difference of these two, critical data versus sensitive data, or critical systems versus sensitive systems. Know the difference between those two. Domain we go through and just talk about the BIA, right? I gave you what I usually do. For the law, investigation, and ethics, I mentioned a bunch of things in here, but FISMA, I would definitely know what that is. And how many times this week did I test you on this? I feel like you guys know this. Out of these 4 or 5 intellectual property included in this, copyright, trademarks, patents, trade secrets, out of those 4, you're going to probably have one question at a high level. Licensing is important. You may have a licensing question on pay as you go, like for cloud services, or we kind of went through and talked about some of these other ones like shrink wrap. But since this is such an important issue and it's kind of an ethics issue, I would think that you would have a question on that as well. In addition to that, this is an international exam, but it's likely that you're going to have a question on ITAR, import export. And so you just know the acronym at a high level. Hopefully by now, at this point in your life, you know what the Fourth Amendment is. So in addition to that, you'll have one question either on HIPAA or high tech. It'll be one or the other, HIPAA or high tech. Right? One of those two. So you'll have one question on one of those two. The Patriot Act, you may see a question on that, but since this is an international exam, I bet you that you see GDPR. I bet you see that on the exam. And then I'd be surprised if they don't bring up PCI DSS. Like if you don't see that on your exam, I'd be surprised. So again, at a high level, I know it's tough to write 5 to 7 words about each one of these, and you guys were rolling your eyes at me, but literally what you need to do is you got to figure out what those key words are for each one of them. And most of the time, it's just the acronym. If you know the acronym, then you can remember what it is, right? And so that's what it goes back today at lunch, what I was saying about all these acronyms, right? It really comes down to, do you know the acronyms? Because most of this stuff is acronyms. And so in the next domain here, protecting security assets, understanding the difference. I think that this is kind of obvious, understanding the difference between PII, PHI, and sensitive information. I brought this up at least 30 times. My goodness, you're going to see at least one question on this, and it'll be one of these answers, and then you'll have another question on the type of crypto needed to protect it. Right, so you'll have actually 2 questions on the different states of data. Remember, all of these can take crypto. It's just cryptography. It's just what kind of cryptography. So you'll actually have one on just tell me the difference between these 3, and then one on, hey, what can we do to protect that data? The idea of DLP here in that same domain. I would definitely spend some time, watch some videos on DLP. If you don't understand what it is, good chance you're going to see one question on that. They love asking questions about degaussing, purging, degaussing. They love asking questions about that. In addition to that, they love asking questions about data owners and data custodians. You guys are doing great. Stay with me. We only got. In cryptography, hopefully I did a decent job with this, because I do actually take some pride in it, and you feel like you actually learned something. I'd be surprised if you don't see a word like integrity and it mentions hashes or digital signatures. I would think that you would have at least one question on the integrity and digital signatures. You know, you know, 100% that you're going to see this word, right? You know you're going to see that word in there. So keep that in mind. You're going to definitely see a question that says, you know, tell me the difference between symmetric and asymmetric encryption. And so you got to be able to delineate that. I don't know, you know, it's hit or miss whether or not people actually see the Kirchhoff's principle. Definitely XOR. Definitely XOR. I think I mentioned this the other day. I'd expect at least one question on XOR. And we went through the exercise for that, if you recall. XOR. Yep. We went through that exercise. You know, some of the historical ciphers, though, like transposition and substitution, I'd be surprised if you saw those. Same with ROT 13. Those are fun and all. Engineer cipher, yeah, no. One-time pad, yeah, absolutely. It's probably not going to be, you know, the history lesson that I gave you, but understanding, you know, that it is only good once. And, I mean, you'll see some sort of context clue that leads you to that. So at a high level, I would know that. In addition to that, the difference between a block cipher and a stream cipher. You know, what's the difference? I remember I drew a little, I said a chunk of meat and for the block cipher, and then, you know, a spigot outside of your house for the stream, like dripping. Those were the examples. So you probably will see that on there. You know, one thing that we typically see here is the number of keys. Like this may be one of the only math questions that you get, hopefully. For symmetric encryption, this is the number of keys. And then asymmetric encryption, this is the easier one, 2N. Right? So you may see one or the other on your exam. I'd be surprised if they get into the details about all the different modes of operands with DES. There's some great YouTube videos that I would go and take a look at. One clear giveaway, either DES or triple DES, is its 64-bit block cipher. And so it's 56 bits plus 8 bits of parity. And triple DES is still a 64-bit block cipher. Both of them have, you can see the 56-bit key with 8 bits of parity. Right? So check it out here. The encrypt, encrypt, encrypt with 3 different keys. Encrypt, decrypt, encrypt with 3 different keys. Encrypt, encrypt, encrypt with 2 keys, and then encrypt, decrypt, encrypt with 2 keys. There's some good videos out there that you can go and watch. Out of all of those symmetric, you know, I would say if you're looking to spend a little bit of time, go in and you know, look at DES, look at triple DES, and then you just got to rely on the bucket. Go and rely on the bucket for the rest of them. Okay. In addition to that, you know, specifically talking about asymmetric cryptography, we went in and talked a little bit about some of these things. You know, RSA, if you recall, we talked about RSA, and if you do see a question on RSA, it'll likely say something about prime numbers. Prime numbers. It's a good context clue for you. Again, the digital signature, I would definitely know how that works. Elliptical curve cryptography. This is small powered electronics is going to be the context clue. And I would say you're going to have a question on this elliptical curve cryptography, and that'll be the giveaway for you for small power electronics. Okay. I mentioned this earlier on, the SHA secure hashing algorithm, 160 bits. You likely will see that on the exam. You know, we went through and talked about collisions, and I talked about the birthday attack. If you recall, it'll either be the birthday attack or it'll be collisions. They're going to mention it one way or another. In addition to that, the rainbow tables. You're definitely going to see a question on rainbow tables, and that's password hashing. It's not passwords. It's password hashes. So it doesn't actually hold the password. It holds the password hashes. At a super high level, understanding how PKI works and that the certificates are in the X509 format. You're likely going to see a question on what's the difference between these two, the CRL and the OCSP. OCSP is in real time, where the CRL is not. So the OCSP is a web service and the CRL is not. So not only for verification, but for replication as well. But good chance you're going to see a question about certificates in the X509 format. You may see something about the asterisk here, right? The little star. And that's a wildcard certificate. That's what that's called. And so you can kind of see the top level domain has a certificate, but all these subdomains do not. Well, instead of creating 4 different certificates for these, we would just create a wildcard certificate with an asterisk on it, and then it covers. This wildcard would cover everything. And so good chance you'll see wildcard certificates. So if I didn't cover that throughout the week, there you go. You can thank me later. We talked about SMIME. Since it is the de facto standard for encrypted email nowadays, it does use X509 certificates. I don't know if you're going to see that on the exam. I already mentioned that you're going to have a question about TLS. This is still in the same domain. You're probably going to have a question on Stego. Lego my Stego. Lego my Ego. Probably have a question on that. You can bet a paycheck that you'll either have a question on the different modes of operation, so transport and tunneling mode, or some of the management and key exchange protocols for IPsec. So it'll either be, it'll say something like a context clue authentication header and encapsulating security payload, the question I'm talking about, that it'll ask you specifically about the transport mode and or the tunneling mode, or the key management protocol. So out of these two, I think, for me, this one's a little bit easier because, the authentication header is not encrypted in the transport mode, but in the tunneling mode, both of them are. So this question would be easier. This one, you may have to go watch a couple videos on because this can get a little wonky. But just knowing that ISAKMP is a key management protocol. So how do we exchange the keys on the public internet? Is it internet key exchange? Is it ISAKMP? How does that happen? Because with IPsec, that's what's got to happen. Is you got to pass those keys on the internet, on the the public internet somehow. I didn't talk about the different types of cryptographic attacks, and that was something that I was hoping to get to today. So out of these different types of attacks, you know, you probably won't see any of these. You'll probably see either this one or this one. This one, but likely you'll see one of those five. Okay, so you'll see brute force key attack, ciphertext only attack, known plain text cryptanalysis, chosen plain text cryptanalysis, chosen ciphertext cryptanalysis. If I was to bet on it, I think that you would likely see the brute force key attack. In addition to that, you know, we went over the birthday attack, and I think we had, you know, 6 different iterations or 6 different collisions that we were able to force. So keep that in mind. So in the models, I talked about a bunch of stuff. Know the difference between what a subject is, what an object is. That'll help you in every domain. But you'll see one question on the difference between a closed system and an open system. Process confinement. We talked about that not only in this domain, but also, again, in the software engineering or software design. Boundaries and isolation. We also talked about that. You're going to have probably 3 questions on these guys right here. 3 questions on what's the difference about those. You guys seem to be you did pretty good on those when I was testing you. In addition to that, you know, you're going to have, you know, probably 3 questions on these over here. I'm sorry, not 38 questions. 3 questions on these over here. So I don't know which ones you're going to have, but you will have a TCB question. You know, maybe information flow, but it seemed like you guys did pretty well with some of these. I would say, you know, definitely at a high level, Bell LaPadula, you know the properties over here for that. The BIBA, you know the different properties for that. Clark Wilson, we talked about that. You guys saw a couple of questions already. You know, the conflict of interest one, the Chinese wall, Brewer Nash. And then we also talked about the Graham Denning and the access control, those being access control lists, those being really one and the same. Access control matrix. I did talk about the Rainbow series and, you know, went through and talked about the TCSEC. I mentioned the common criteria, and I said you're going to have 1 question on that. And those questions will likely be EAL. It's in the game. So it'll be 1 question on all of those EAL levels, evaluation assurance levels. I mentioned, you know, certification and accreditation. I think that a lot of you are doing risk management right now, so you probably have a good understanding of that. So again, at a high level. I didn't really touch on the protection rings. and I'm not sure if you will have those, but a lot of people coming into this already understand how the CPU works and the different protection rings around it. But I didn't really cover that. There's stuff that I have to figure out. I got to figure out a way to get all this stuff into the week, and some things I can usually get about 90%. And if there's questions that you have, let's talk about it next Friday. We went through a lot of the cloud-based computing components. Definitely, I'd say 5 questions on cloud at least. So know those very, very well. Know the difference between the type 1 and type 2 hypervisors. One is on bare metal, the other one's on a hosted machine, like VirtualBox would be a type 2. I didn't really get into a lot of the web-based vulnerabilities that are out there, and certainly I can cover those next week. But those are typically things that people either already know or I can just help you at a later time with that. So usually for these, what we typically will see is we'll see some sort of injection attack, like a SQL injection on the exam, and there's a slide on how to do that right there. Usually we see that. Usually we see a question about cross-site scripting. I got some good videos on YouTube describe that. And then the last thing here in this domain, bring your own device. I mean, BYOD. There may be a tricky question on that, but sometimes it shows up, other times it doesn't. Talked about cyber physical systems, data hunting, and I think that's all I want to say about this domain right here. Okay, how are we doing on time? What time is it? Okay, I got 5 minutes here. All right, so physical security. Let me see here. May see something on the CPTED. I talked about that. I recorded that. That was pretty fun, or at least I thought it was. Man traps. I remember I mentioned bollards. Sometimes we see bollards on there. I gave you a goofy question about lighting. 2-foot candles or something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head. We did talk about these guys right here and went through what those looked like. So, I would expect you're going to have a question on those. In addition to that, the different fire classes and the suppression mechanisms. You're going to have one question on that. What's up this week, bro? Damn. I went through and talked about some of the different types of remote access. Definitely know what a VPN is. Definitely know what remote desktop is. Professionals, we need to know what those are, even if you don't see any questions on the exam. In the VPN, we went through and talked about this in pretty good detail. I went in and talked about IPsec and some of the different tunneling. At a super high level, I would know enough to be dangerous in that. So keep that in mind. Just give me a few more minutes here. I'm trying.
Sorry, what did you say to keep in mind? I missed that.
Oh, I just said give me a few more minutes. I'm trying.
Oh, I mean before that.
Tunneling protocols.
Yeah, got it.
Oh, VPNs. Yeah, I was talking about VPNs. Okay, so here, multi-factor authentication. I mean, definitely know that. The difference between FAR, FRR, and CER. We know that. Going in, and you'll see a question either on CHAP or MS CHAP. Remember, that's the challenge handshake authentication protocol. Just remember Kerberos, tickets, please, tickets, please. Radius, I mentioned, and I went through, and drew that out. Open authentication, I didn't really talk about, but if you guys want to talk about that next week, I can definitely explain that. That's something that's pretty cool. So what is this? Controlling and monitoring access. Yeah, we talked about rights, permissions, privileges. I went into implicit deny. We talked about the access control matrix and access control list. Definitely already said this, but you'll get a question on each one of these: MAC, DAC, role-based, and rule-based. You'll get a question on each one of those. So keep that in mind. You may get a question on salting, which is basically like padding a password to make it look different. I didn't really talk about that, but maybe I don't. It's hit or miss whether that actually shows up on the salting. But if you're watching this back in the recording and you have time, I would definitely, at a high level, take a look at that. All right, a few more domains. Just if you guys feel free to drop off if you need to drop right now. I went through and talked about security assessments and testing. Knowing the difference between a vulnerability assessment and a penetration test. If you recall, I talked about vulnerability assessment being like the Jello, and the penetration test like sticking your finger through the Jello. So at a high level, understanding what the difference is between the two is super important. Penetration testing, the different types of tests, I would definitely know. I mentioned this. I mentioned all of these things multiple times throughout the week. Code review, static testing, dynamic testing, and fuzzing. Those are fair game. 100. right, we talked about need to know and least privilege at a super high level. This word transitive trust sometimes shows up, and that is basically, you give somebody access to something, and that somebody gives somebody else access to something, and so it's like because of A and because of B, then there's a transitive trust between A and C, even though there's not a really like exclusive privileges that you've assigned. Sometimes it can end up giving people access that way. Service level agreements, we talked about that. In addition to that, we talked about change and configuration management. Talked about how security and patch management can be part of that change management process. No stuff. And then preventing and responding to incidents. We went through this today, and I said that you should know the phases, what order that they go in. We saw this word multiple times on here, right? The threshold, the clipping levels. Saw that multiple times throughout the week. The different types of evidence. Different types of evidence. And then, hot site, cold site, warm site, you definitely will see on the exam. I bet you have one question on that. And then remember I mentioned earlier today, likely you're going to have one question on this as well. All right, a couple more here, and then I'll you. Let me do that right here. Recovery. Yeah, disaster recovery. I mean, I talked about this, this afternoon. All the different types of backups in here. The business impact analysis. I've mentioned that, so definitely you got to know what that is. The RPO, RTO. We talked about that. Again, the hot site, warm site, cold site. Fault tolerance. We went through RAID. There's, you're going to have at least one question on RAID. And I went through the different types of RAID. I said there's going to be one question on this junk. I definitely think that is still okay. So you can get excited about that. Investigation and ethics. Oh yeah, this domain. There's only two more domains. Just give me a second. Investigation and ethics. I mentioned different types of investigations. We need to do a root cause analysis. Figuring out what that looks like, and then you'll have two questions on the ethics, the canons, as well as the preamble here, truth, justice. So. Right, and then with the software development security, and then this one, and then one last one. Definitely life cycle, understanding, what that looks like and why it's important. Probably one question on these life cycle models. We mentioned the CMMI, one question on that. Definitely 3 to 5 questions on configuration management. You'll probably see API mentioned at least once on the exam, so know what that is. I talked about software testing, and we've seen that a few times rear its head. I went through databases and gave you guys a pretty good understanding of databases, I think. So that's fair game. I would be surprised if it's any more than a super high level understanding of that. So you don't need to be an expert. And then lastly, but not least here, the different types of attacks. And that's one of the things that, I didn't cover very much throughout the week, because these are typically things that people can go and, either watch videos or we can cover next week. But, these top three: cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, SQL injection, those are definitely things that I would, think are fair game for the exam. They love ransomware, Trojans, rootkits. We can talk about all these things. In addition to that, macro viruses, like with Word and Excel, typically they have macros built into those. So for a long time, people would exploit those. Sometimes people can, do spoofing and spoof different addresses. So the word spoofing you may see on there. The idea of a keylogger, like actually placing it on somebody's machine and seeing what they're actually typing, that's real, and that happens. Again, I mentioned MAC address spoofing. You can also spoof IP addresses. And we talked a little bit about denial of service, but not much. I don't really do very much with that. Some of these different types of shells, I'd be surprised if they even ask anything about, reverse shells from like Netcat or anything. It seems a little too devil in the details with technical. So I don't know if I'd even expect to see any of those. But if you guys want to talk about them, put that in the hopper for us to talk about them next Friday. Again, at super high level. One thing that I would say is going to be on the exam is privilege escalation. So, your regular user, that user gets local administrative privileges. Then when you get local administration privileges, you can turn yourself into a network admin or delegated admin, all the way up to God mode on a network, which is the domain admin. So privilege escalation, definitely have one question on there. It'd be interesting to go back and watch this video to see how many. You're definitely going to have one question, quote unquote, over the last 45 minutes or so.